Hi, everyone. Dr. Liz here. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast. I'm glad you're here, glad you're listening and learning, and hopefully it will help you with your journey along the way. I am a psychotherapist with a specialty in anxiety, insomnia, and deeper emotional healing. Hypnosis is one of the tools in my toolbox that I use to help people feel better and to help people be better. I do work all over the world. Please feel free to reach out and contact me if you would like some help. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my adult life, built an award-winning company, sold it, and then focused mainly on my private practice. That gives you a unique perspective, especially my ability to work with people in business at all kinds of levels. Before I go, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can go and subscribe to the newsletter. And you'll get free hypnosis downloads that you can listen to immediately. Another way is to buy one of the downloads that I have for sale. I only have a couple up there, but they're good ones. They've stood the test of time. I made the decision to not run ads during my podcast because I really do see it as an act of service. I completely respect people who do have ads on their podcast, but it's just not my path. All right, everyone, enjoy the episode. And I hope to see you back here soon. My interview today is with Allison Freeman. She created a community called Attuned Pathways where neurodivergent parents can go to get support. And not just support as in reading stuff or mini courses or that type of thing, but actual live, meaningful community support, like these group calls where they can really brainstorm and work through what's going on with them as parents, as they navigate parenthood as a neurodivergent parent, which is different than navigating parenthood as a more neurotypical parent. Regardless of whether your child is neurotypical or neurodivergent, Allison had emailed me to let me know about this community that she's built. And I immediately read the email and thought, oh my God, I've got to interview her. And more people need to know about this. This is so valuable. There are support groups for parents of neurodivergent children that I've seen, but I have not ever seen before a support group for neurodivergent parents. And that is her focus. Now, she does say very clearly that neurodivergent, quote unquote, is a very loose term, doesn't need to be anything officially diagnosed. And during the interview, near the end, she tells about the type of thoughts you may be having that are cues of maybe this is a community for me so that you can check it out. Now, I identify as highly sensitive, meaning all kinds of sensory stuff is processed differently for me. I'm more sensitive to light, sounds, textures, clothing. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how many struggles I've had with clothing. Smells. Oh man. Yeah, we talk about mother-in-laws near the end of the interview. And it's like, there was this one Christmas where we were driving up to my brother-in-law's house and we were taking my mother-in-law with us. And I asked my husband, could you please ask her not to wear perfume? It gives me a headache. We're going to be in the car for 14 hours. It gets really awful for me. And of course she wore the perfume. I ended up with like a 10-hour headache or something. Love her these days, but believe me, that was a tough car ride for me. That's just one example of many, many, many things that HSPs and autistic people deal with in terms of sensory sensitivities. Sensory sensitivities is on one leg of the triangle that's needed to diagnose autism. You've got to qualify for all three legs, and I don't. So I'm not autistic myself, but I do have the sensory sensitivities, and often people will have the sensory sensitivities, not really know what highly sensitive person is, HSP, and think that they're autistic. Sometimes I have to clarify that for them when they come in for an adult autism diagnosis. And just so you know, I only do adults over 18 for adult autism evaluations. And there's two levels of that. So one is a far more formal level, which someone could use that report to apply for disability. That takes a lot more time as well. But I also offer an assessment session, quote unquote, where we meet for 90 minutes to 2 hours and we're reviewing the criteria of autism and whether someone meets it based on their life experiences, what they've been through in the past and currently is all taken into account, and I give my professional opinion. And it can be very validating for someone, either way, actually, to say, okay, yes, I meet criteria for autism or I don't. I am private pay, so none of that shows up on your insurance records, particularly if you don't want it to. Okay, there's some downsides that can happen sometimes when someone has a diagnosis of autism in their records. It's a whole nother episode, and I've actually recorded it, so you can go listen to that one. Search it up because I don't know the number off the top of my head. All right, let's jump into hearing from Allison and how she came up with this wonderful community and what it offers parents. Hi, Allison. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you agreed to be here because I think there's some well-needed information that you're going to let our audience know. So we're just going to jump into that. Um, why don't you give us some background about how you decided to be a therapist and then how you got into autism support, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So, a big question there,
Mhm.
but my path was really something that was a felt sense, really from really when I was younger. I always had an interest in people and human psychology. And so I was funneled there naturally, like so many of us are. But I actually
Mhm.
started my career as a school counselor. So the first 13 years after graduating with my school counseling degree, I was in an elementary school, and that's where I really started seeing the need for neurodivergent support. And it would start for me at the school level, noticing the challenges that were chronic. There were so many patterns in children that were really high masking,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
those would trickle into the family. So it was kind of a combination of an interest there.
Okay.
And that led me into I needed more freedom. So being in the school system, you're really bound by a lot of system, those system, I guess, boundaries or just a lot of that. We've got to do it one way. There's not a whole lot of resources to go deeper and to support these
Mm.
kids and families to the level that I really wanted to. So I actually went back to school, um,
Mhm.
and I added on my clinical licensure, and then I left the school system, and now that is where my work is primarily. I work with either late diagnosed autistic and ADHD clients, or adolescents who are high masking. So that's kind of, yeah, how I was funneled there. I myself, I am an ADHD and
Mhm.
autistic therapist and mother of an ADHD son who is in middle school.
Okay, great. And when you say late diagnosed, you're referring to an adulthood.
Yes, anything
Mm.
after school age.
Okay. So like after 18,
Yeah,
basically in the
yes.
US, run up until 17, 18 is when kids graduate from high school.
Yes, that is how we conceptualize that. It's almost like, a second phase of life into that early adulthood. So anytime
Yes.
after there, really, yeah. And that can be a wide span of years that some people will discover that in themselves.
Yeah. And when did you discover it yourself, or were you diagnosed as a kid?
A little bit of both. So ADHD was discovered in school for me.
Hmm.
And the big thing that was noticed was inattention. It was something that I began to notice as I was a little older, getting into secondary school, and then others around me. I think it impacted. I think
Uh-huh.
it impacted me to a level that the adults noticed. That was the key for being diagnosed there. They had to notice that my potential wasn't being met, and that's when they took me in for testing,
Mm-hmm.
and I met that clinical threshold. And it was helpful to a degree. I think it informed teachers and my parents, and they were able to accommodate me a bit better, but it was not the whole picture.
Uh-huh.
There were still a lot of pieces that were kind of a misalignment, I would say, for
Yeah.
me. And that was something I had to figure out. I wasn't diagnosed with autism until I was 35.
35. Okay,
Yes.
so that's late.
Yes.
Yeah. And how did that come about?
That was a whole self-exploration, self-discovery
Hmm.
experience. And I think I had a little bit of a privilege there, honestly. Just being so exposed to or immersed in the world of high masking autism. It's its own thing.
Hmm.
It's not quite the same as the stereotypical autism that people have been learning about over the last couple decades. It is its own thing. And so working with my son definitely was the beginning of it where
Hmm.
as we were supporting him, I had these moments of, well, but I did that. Or,
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
hold on, are we sure? And then it was through therapy, my own
Hmm.
therapy, that I was able to have patterns reflected back to me. So a combination of some luck, being
Hmm.
exposed to the populations that could mirror those things in myself back to me.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. And I have quite a few parents that come in that contact me because I do just adult autism evaluations. I don't do childhood. And often people will contact me as adults saying, "Hey, my kid was just diagnosed, and I want to know if I'm autistic too, because I see all these similarities in me."
Yes, yes, it is a pattern for sure. And that's very similar to what I notice in my practice as well. And I think that's so important to that
Hmm.
we listen to, that we are able to tune into, turn inward,
Hmm.
and do exactly what you just described. Yes, slow it down. Be with what you're noticing, get curious, and then seek out some information outside of just yourself. I think that is a huge, huge piece. It's so worthwhile.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It really is. And I think when people identify that, parents identify it, I think the support can also change for the child. Like the child's experience of support is is actually what I'm trying to say. Like, well, I think the actual support can change too, right? But I tend to assume that people are empathetic parents, and both my kids laugh at that because they're like, no, most people are not empathetic. Most parents are not like you. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess I like to assume the best of people and that they're going to support their kids no matter what. But I think that, I don't know, there's some qualitative change in there if the child knows, oh, my mom or my dad are autistic too, and they just didn't know it before this. So I think there is a different experience of that as a child, I would assume. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's so important. And even having that as an important reframe. Because for me, I think a lot of the time when we are trying to really support our children, and we're doing it out of sometimes it's this skill we don't even realize is unique to us as neurodivergent people, which is, really like hyper empathy and attunement,
Hmm.
where we're
Hmm.
really tuned into our children and we see things. We have a sight that is sometimes beyond what neurotypical parenting can look like, right? And so
Hmm.
we notice these things that may fly under the radar for others. And it turns out, okay, so yeah, my child has what we call low support needs autism, possibly.
Hmm.
And it is something that's a little bit more nuanced to catch. And you're having to be their biggest advocate in those
Yes.
situations, if they are in these places like compliance-based systems in the school system, right?
Yes.
those needs are misaligned. The needs the school system has, it's misaligned with what the needs of the child are, because compliance and the flexibility and all of the approaches we really need to have for neurocomplex kiddos, it doesn't really, it's not something we have right now. So, as you were the parent doing that advocacy work for your child, I mean, I remember just this really intense pull between wanting and needing and knowing I needed to be there for my child.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw his needs and I saw the things that needed to be tweaked or accommodated, and it was simple to me. And then I would get pushback from the school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that pushback would trigger all of this internalized shame and ableism and all of these things, you're taught, don't rock the boat, be a good girl, right? We
Mm-hmm.
need to make sure that we are being compliant. It would just flare all of that up. But when we talk about bringing in or weaving in the possibility of our own highly masked autistic identity,
Mm-hmm.
there is we have an easier time there deconstructing some of that internalized shame, internalized ableism, getting really introspective,
Yeah.
and showing up with more fervor and more confidence for our child as we're broadening our entire perspective. This becomes less laser focused on my singular child's needs, and
Yes.
it moves into this global space. So yeah, absolutely. So to that point, I think it is incredibly worthwhile to slow down and be curious about that in yourself. And the reframe would be, it is going to only deepen that support and help you with clarity as you're navigating how to do it.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that you see it a similar way as I do, because often I will see parents just not understand. I'm just going to put it very simply. So I'm in
Mhm.
several Facebook groups of parents of autistic children, and they'll post questions where they're assuming that the child is doing something out of obstinance, let's say, um,
Yeah, yeah.
versus like, I don't know, it's if they had a deeper understanding of that. And that's always the goal is I think they're wanting a deeper understanding of that. That's why they're posting the question.
Mhm.
And honestly, the communities are great that I belong to about providing that for them. But it's like with a deeper understanding of that, then that negative bent on the child, I think, dissolves. So instead
Mhm.
of feeling like, oh, this child is doing this to bug me or because they don't want to do something or they're just being obstinate, like those types of things, it's like, no, this is like asking them to grow an extra toe or something, like it's not going to happen. Like it just, no, like they're not doing this just to be a certain way. They are a certain way, and that's what's difficult for them. It's funny. I'm going to give a more specific example for the listeners, but somebody had posted recently, like my child cannot be on time to school, and she's really frustrated about this. This was a mom, and I responded and said, "Yeah, I face the same thing." The best thing that I recommend is change your work schedule and arrange with the school that she won't be punished. Like, this is not something that she just can do, quote unquote. And it's still, as a parent, it doesn't make sense to me why, um, 9:15 is any different than 8:45 or something, right? But I face that with my kid too. And, I tried everything under the sun and finally I was like, well, I'm just going to push my work schedule back so that I'm not anxious, right? Getting to my office. That's it, because she is going to be late, period. It doesn't matter what I do. So, to me, it's like, all right, as a parent, you modify your behavior. And luckily, I have the opportunity to do that. Like, I understand not everyone's workplaces give them the opportunity to do that. And then it really is stressful for them. And you keep trying to look for solutions and do that type of thing. I don't know. I just thought like that's a common example where
Yes, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. For a neurotypical kid, I think you can set alarms and do this and do that and do all the standard stuff. But when you get into parenting a child who's not neurotypical, a lot of that stuff doesn't work. You have to figure out something different for them.
Yeah, it really is that, when this comes up in sessions, I do coaching for the parents of the children or adolescents that I see as well, if they're interested in that. So
Hmm.
when we go into those spaces and they bring these concerns, like you're reading or getting in these communities, they bring these concerns into those sessions. And this is the work that we do with mindset, right?
Yes.
So it really is a shift between a closed and a rigid mindset that I mean, it's programmed into us. If we're in mainstream school, I mean, just in societies in general, in our capitalism, way, it's all about productivity and individualism. And I think that just funnels us into this rigid, closed mindset that, it's just one foot in front of the other. And so if we have those blinders on because our number one goal has been to be a successful member of those systems, it's almost like we're on this extreme end of a spectrum without realizing it, right? Like
Yeah.
we are just kind of going through the motions. So
Hmm.
what we do in work one-on-one is just do that introspection, and we go to the drawing board, and
Hmm.
it doesn't really, have any real end goal. We are creative, we're flexible with where we want to go.
Hmm.
The only real goal that I always have clients lean into is, can we drop just a little bit of that rigidity, that tension, that must, that really, really intense drive for, these are our options, one or the other. That's all we've got. That's the best we can do. We're going to kind of force this round peg into a square hole. It's really about looking at the fear there.
Hmm.
What would happen? What's the risk, and getting deeper out of the logic, deeper into that emotional space. And then once they see it, right? Once we tend to go there introspectively, especially with a professional or a community that can mirror back to us what's going on for us, um,
Yes.
that perspective shift is usually what opens my clients up. And then once you open that up, I mean, the world's your oyster. It's really about finding what those limits are. Like you said, if you can push back your work schedule, oh my goodness, there you go. It was really a simple shift right in front of you,
Yeah.
but you had to be open enough to see it, right?
Yes.
You had to be trusting enough, or maybe it's gonna be harder. Maybe it's gonna be we've got to tap into something we haven't really considered, or maybe it's something that we need to tap into that we've just been resisting for some other reason. But that exploration, it's going to show us. It's going to show us what's behind the resistance. It's going to show us what our options are. It's really beautiful.
Yes, I love how you put that. Like just an opening up, a brainstorming, and then
Mhm.
it shifts that perspective. So tell us how you did create this community where you
Mhm.
have the opportunity to support parents in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, yeah. So, the community that I'm hosting right now, we're currently a small group of just about all late diagnosed ADHD parents.
Okay.
And the goal we have currently, so there's about, let me see, 11 of us right now. And the goal that we have currently is being in a space, being in community with one another online. And so these are participants from all over the US right now.
Hmm.
And we come together with a focus each week where we are getting a little bit of that learning on the front end, something that surrounds the specific experience of high masking or late diagnosed autism and ADHD, because there's an ongoing deconstruction, right? Just what we talked about, going from the rigid compliance-based programming, right,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
trying to move into the flexibility in a world that does not have that same site that pushes back a lot, right?
Hmm.
Constantly, the group members are running up against that internalized shame coming up, like, oh, I've rocked the boat. See,
Yeah.
this is why we can't do that. And when that is the dominant narrative, and we are trying to step outside of that to create this beautiful equilibrium,
Mhm.
but we don't have community behind us. We don't have meaningful community who can mirror back what we are experiencing. Talk about hard mode, I mean, it
Yeah.
is so difficult and confusing, and our partners may disagree with us, and it's just this slog to try to do. And a lot of the time, people will throw in the towel. They'll give up without community. So the idea behind this was to give a space, an option for not only learning, but also to be able to share. So participants will come each week. We do about 20 minutes of learning on a
Mhm.
topic, and they have the topic ahead of time so they can kind of pick and choose how they want to participate. And then we leave the end open for community support, conversation. I will ask about a specific event coming up that week, or something that they had experienced, and we'll tie it back into a reflection on what we learned. This last week, a great example was we talked about the difference between typical anxiety, and the
Mhm.
typical treatments of anxiety. And we compared that to what atypical or more neurodivergent anxiety looks like. And they're very different. But our society doesn't have this context. So
Mm.
it's the difference between like a fear of the unknown, like what if I go, drive on the highway and suddenly I'm stuck in traffic and I have to go to the bathroom, and that's typical anxiety. It's this fear of the unknown.
Mhm.
And so we avoid, but there's a difference, right? So we talked about how more neurodivergent anxiety is actually dread, right? It's informed
Mhm.
knowledge, experiences that have informed us, like I'm about to go, maybe have to sit into a meeting that doesn't have an agenda, and the lights are going to be blaring in my eyes. I don't know when I'm going to get out. I'm going to have to deal with all the sensory overload. I'm going to have to be on, that's not really
Yeah.
anxiety. That's dread about a real thing that you really do know about.
Yes.
So we'll tie that in. We have that education, and I'll ask them, go ahead and give me a time where you felt that you were anxious about something and you overrode those anxiety cues in the
Oh,
name
yeah.
of, exposure, in the name of we're going to be brave and we're not going to avoid this. And so then at the end of it, we'll revisit that what they shared, and they'll realize, huh, yeah, I'm pretty sure that was dread actually, and this is what I was actually dreading
Mhm.
doing over anxiety. And so it's these aha moments. It's being able to come to the meeting and have an experience shared about what we're dealing with at the school level, and get this
Mhm.
entirely, this empathetic and engaged and informed group of people going through, and they know what each other is going through, people going through the same thing, and being able to say, absolutely, you are absolutely on the correct path.
Mhm.
Even if there is no one else to validate you, we can, and here's what we know, and here is why it is valid what you are doing. And every week, it's just leaving with this sense of relief and lightness, and just this felt sense that even though we're challenging a dominant narrative, it does not take away from the validity there and from the importance of it.
Oh, I love it. It sounds wonderful, honestly. Like it really
It-
does. Because even as you were talking, um, I was thinking about different friends that I have, and some are more neurodivergent affirming than others
yeah.
because of their own experiences
Mhm.
and their own neurological makeup as well. Like we
Absolutely.
were saying, previously, if you face that, you understand it at a deeper level sometimes. So I was thinking about that, and the brainstorming, I think even that neurodivergent parents come up with is very different than what a more neurotypical
Mhm.
parent would come up with, sort of like the lateness example is like, well, you just make them do it. Like you, and it's like, well, that's not going to work with my kid. Like I can't make her do anything, very little, particularly at this
Mhm.
age. Even when she was little, it's like, nope, you
Yeah.
can. That creates so much like overwhelm, conflict, hour long tantrums when she's little bitty, creates all this negativity around it. Trauma, it goes into trauma for some children, even.
Yeah.
So, I prefer not that exact a parenting strategy of making. But my point here is that what a wonderful way to create support and access support for parents. What an incredible resource you could access there is what I'm thinking. Brainstorming information that's not being presented in other areas. I mean, I think there's a lot more information nowadays than there was even 5 or 10 years ago, but it's not always interactive, right? Like, if you're thinking about videos or TikTok or something like that, it's not a conversation often where you could be like, what about this? Okay, I tried that. And now what about this? And then also talk about the effect on you, like how it affected you, or thinking about, I just can't do that. I'm not able to do that. Like that type of thing. It's sort of
Mhm.
going on here, but I'm just picturing how wonderful that is.
Yes. Yeah. It's that there is a statistic that pops up for me so often when I think about exactly what it is you're talking about, right? There's value in learning, and there's value on TikTok and in podcasts and YouTube and getting this information because it starts to open us up and it gets us into a reflective mindset, right? And that's so beautiful and so necessary. But there's this
Yes.
statistic that comes up when trying to sort of conceptualize the value there in taking it a step further into things like community, right? Into things
Yes.
like coaching and therapy and working with another individual, another human. And it's this a study that was done that shows that talking out loud
Hmm.
about a topic that you are kind of ruminating on and trying to make sense of, talking out loud for, I can't remember the exact number of seconds, but it's seconds, right?
Uh-huh.
Talking out loud and having it heard, right? And being in that, it's a very human experience. We're social creatures, right?
Yes.
Even with neurodivergence, there's still, it's just a difference. It's a difference in social and need and the way we do it. But in doing that, we get the amount of relief that comes with doing that out loud talking
Yeah.
and taking it from our mind and verbalizing it and having it mirrored back to us or processed with us. It's almost like this, you go from 50% support through the education modalities, through watching videos and through learning and informing yourself. And it's this additional, almost like closing a loop, like another 50%. And there you have it. You've closed or you have fully processed this entire nugget of information, this entire topic. So,
Yes. I believe
yes.
it. Yeah, I believe I haven't seen the study, but I believe it. Because even like support groups on
Mhm.
Facebook, let's say, which
Mhm.
or Reddit or anything like that,
Yeah.
Discord, you are interacting, but you are missing that out
Mhm.
loud piece. And you're also exerting a lot of energy sometimes explaining yourself. Like when people misinterpret, like, like,
Yes,
no, no,
that's
no,
so
I
true.
didn't
Yes.
mean that, or of course I'm not doing this, or what about this? Like, and there's the delay too, right? As you wait for responses to come in and you read them
So
and
different. Yeah.
yeah, and you're
The dynamics
also
are so different.
they are, and you also know there's always a risk of being attacked, and so
Yep. Yes.
in some way, some shape or form,
And so then where we try to go for support, we can end up really questioning
yes,
ourselves more than we went into to begin with. And that is defeating the purpose. And there you go. Like your energy has now been spent in a place that couldn't nurture it. It couldn't create a safety place for it. So this is, I think
Yes, correct.
that's another piece to this too. So, when I think about how this is differentiated, from Facebook support groups and Reddit support groups, and that's typically where members have found me,
Hmm.
because I have always been in those spaces. I think, my journey definitely started on Reddit and with books, and trying to connect that way. And so that's just very natural for me to be in those spaces. I
Hmm.
think a lot of us as neurodivergent people, we're data collectors, right?
Yes.
Just constantly trying to make sense of our experiences, and it's so beautiful, and it can be so exhausting too.
Mhm.
But yeah, coming out of those types of forums, I think that until you do it, you don't really know what you're going to get. You don't really
Yeah.
understand that power in being in a place that is safely moderated, by an expert who is able to maintain complete, safety for, as much as you can in a group.
Yes.
Um, but being able to be protected and making sure that members are vetted, and yeah, it's a totally different experience. You don't have to put as much energy into it, and you get so much more of that need of being
Hmm.
felt and seen and understood. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, I want to know two things. One, how can listeners find it and how can they join? And two, what is the, um, how do we put that criteria for joining? Like, I know
Yeah.
when you originally emailed me, you said it's for educating and empowering neurodivergent parents, but do you
Hmm.
have to have even a self-diagnosis of ADHD or autism? Can you be highly sensitive? Can you be an artist? I put that under neurodivergent
Hmm.
umbrella. Fine. Like
Yes.
you just think a little differently. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, who can join that community?
Yeah, so great questions. In the spirit of making or meeting that need of neurodivergent, or, yeah, like you said, detailed thinkers and creatives. My website is an absolute wealth of information. I have attempted to put every single bit of information that I can on there, that will be helpful for people who are interested in checking us out or joining, to be able to learn more.
Hmm.
You do not need any formal diagnosis. I find that is a huge barrier, to
Yeah.
getting the support that we need. So, this is going to be for when we're dealing with things like systemic labels and those
Mhm.
processes that can be so difficult. I think the number one thing is really learning to tune into ourselves. So, for any parent who is noticing there's a pattern of struggle,
Mhm.
and when I say struggle, it might be in parenting itself. It was way harder than you had expected, and the textbook approaches are not working,
Mhm.
or the burnout was profound, and you did not expect that either. These are all cues to listen to, and they are all great telltale signs that there may be, just you have a different, neuro profile than maybe the majority of society, and that's beautiful. And this is a place to explore that. So, yes, highly sensitive, creative artists. Right now, the group is made up of a lot of moms and dads. It's all types of, we're different gender, but also a lot of people who are already in some either helper spaces or creative spaces. We've got
Mhm.
therapists, we have social workers, we have yoga instructors. It's a lot of those types of personalities, just incredibly empathetic. So it's a very safe space to be a part of. And if you are interested in, maybe there's this whole thing of like, gosh, I'm a parent. It's one of the most demanding roles that we could have in our society. How do I know
Mhm.
if I can make time for this? And how do I know if I want to commit to it? It's really month by month participation. So let's say that you have a month that is just absolutely chaotic. And
Mhm.
coming up on the holidays, I do anticipate that, our meetings are going to be a bit different. But if you have a month that's going to be chaotic, you can kind of pause a month and come back. And I try to make it so that payment is not a barrier either. So this is just kind of the payment to participate is very low. We're $45 a month. And there's a parenting course that I have up there too, for highly sensitive children and parents. So yeah, it's really neuro-inclusive. The biggest thing is that you are noticing this is kind of like parenting on hard mode. This is not what I notice my friends are experiencing. I get a lot of feedback from others or judgments on how I'm doing things, and I am spent. Something is off.
Hmm.
That's really what I want people to look for. That's it.
Okay,
That is
great.
enough to listen to.
Yes. And what's the website?
And the website is Attuned Pathways. It's the name of the group. It's attunedpathways.podia.com. It's a course hosting site as well. So we have courses you can delve into that I have created if you're interested, but it's completely optional. So that's the website. I also have, if you would just like to connect and stay in touch, I also have an Instagram page
Hmm.
that is called Attunement Method. And that one is where I also share just a lot of free resources. You can get some nice community support there as well for completely free.
Great, great. Thank you. So, listeners, you can always access those websites or the Instagram on the show notes too. So, they're always in the show notes. Show notes are always on my website, even if they're not appearing in your podcast app. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't there. So, you can always go to the website and look for them there too. So, thank you so much, Allison, for sharing your wisdom with us and telling us about how this all came to be. And I would think your enrollment would go up during the holidays, honestly. Like, they're so
Yeah,
hard.
I know it's so much to navigate.
Yeah,
Yes, I would not be surprised because we are getting close.
yeah, I know a lot of questions during the holidays are how do I navigate parties? I'm seeing this with my own autistic
Mm.
clients. How do I navigate holiday parties? For parents of smaller kids, like how do I handle the grandparents or, aunts and uncles who are going to criticize me or say, you should, right? You should do this. You should do that. Why are you doing that? You
Oh,
know, make
yes.
him sit at the dinner table.
Yes. It's so intense. And it's like,
Like,
how am I
oh,
supposed to be the one in those situations who stays
I
grounded
know I'm laughing
for my child?
because it's
You're
so
pushing me to the limit.
exactly. I'm laughing because it's so difficult, to
Yes.
navigate those often when people are expecting things to just be a certain
Mm,
way and they're not. They're not. Like not for
mm,
you, not for your kid or kiddos. Yeah. So that's where the laughter is coming from. So glad I don't have to
mm.
do much of that anymore as my kids are older now. And it's like if they don't want to
Yes.
go, they
You're
don't go. They don't go to the party. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the thing too with mine now, this is something that we shift into. It's like, ooh, once you get creative there for us, we've shifted into with this Thanksgiving coming up,
Mhm.
my ADHD son, it's amazing for him to come and to be a part and to engage for whatever capacity,
Yeah.
whatever amount of time he has. I mean, what a gift that he's able to show up and give that part of him to family. And we're letting him bring his Xbox and put it upstairs and hook it up whenever he needs a break. He's got that.
Yeah.
That's already done for him. He doesn't have to be in that fight or flight mode,
Yeah.
just wondering when he'll be able to escape because he has parents who have done the work and who have done what it takes to give him just a sense of safety. It actually it allows him to stay engaged with family for longer because
Yeah.
he knows that he can go and have that permission to go just be alone and decompress.
Wonderful.
So that's what we do in the group. We really look at like, how important is it that we do show up in
Yes.
these socially
Mhm.
acceptable ways, how we always have been trained to.
Yeah, right. Yeah. What are the options here? And how do you tune into
Mhm.
that for yourself as well?
Mm,
Yeah. Is the
yes.
dread there?
Yeah.
If the dread is there, perhaps we listen to it.
Yes, if the dread is
Or how
there,
do we
we listen to
navigate
it.
it?
Yes.
How do we ourselves navigate that feeling? Hmm.
Yep, it is a game changer. And imagining doing something that can be, we'll use the word provocative, right?
Uh-huh.
So provocative, right? Just to tune into ourselves and to take up a little bit more space. And it is whenever we've been programmed to kind of put others before ourselves or minimize our own needs. But to do that in isolation, I mean, yeah, it's
Yeah,
daunting,
it
right? You're
is.
just opening yourself up for more judgment, but having the community. I mean, often, our members will talk about, I thought of what we talked about last week, and it made it so much more clear in that moment with my mother-in-law what to do. And that's beautiful
Oh,
feedback.
yeah, I love it. That's awesome. Anything that's going to help you with your mother-in-law, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so true.
So again, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was lovely. I'm glad to get to share a little bit more about something that I think a lot more people experience than we realize.
I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. Remember that you can get free hypnosis downloads over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com, DRLIZ hypnosis.com. I work all over the world doing hypnosis. So if you're interested in working with me, please schedule a free consultation over at my website, and we'll see what your goals are and if I can be of service to you in helping you reach them. Finally, if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast or tell a friend. That way, more and more people learn about the power of hypnosis. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Peace. This podcast is not mental health treatment, nor should it replace mental health treatment. If you need therapy or hypnotherapy, please seek treatment from a trained professional.